supported safe travels and figuring out how to deal with the high call volume they were receiving with people traveling or returning to Hawaii. While we've typically thrown more headcount at a problem like this, it's not always the right solution or a doable one. This is where technology was able to enhance the solution. Not only were they able to successfully provide a solution to handle customer support, but the data that came in also served as intelligence that drove other solutions and enhancements. The team at eWorld and Google Cloud will be sharing an overview of the chatbot today. We'll be sharing some great local solutions, and then we'll dive into a workshop. And you should have received an email from me yesterday or this morning with tokens to use for the lab. So now I would like to introduce Joel Bongo, the Vice President and CTO of eWorld Enterprise Solutions. At eWorld, Joel guides state, local, commercial organizations through technological change. For more than a decade now, he's led some of Hawaii's largest IT projects. Past projects include implementing student information system, Infinite Campus, for the DOE, and most recently, Joel implemented Safe Travels call center and the Department of Labor call center. Over the last 30 years in the IT industry, Joel has learned that all great technological transformations come down to three simple things: people, process, and technology. And with that, I'd like to welcome Joel to kick things off.
Awesome. Thank you, Michelle. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining in on our Chatbot Bootcamp. And, it's pretty refreshing how Michelle talked about that story. So I was one of those stories, local boy, grew up here, and then moved up to the Bay Area, worked in Silicon Valley for a number of years, and then down to Southern California, and then spent a year or two in Asia Pacific from mainland China all the way to New Zealand. So it's really nice to have had that experience and then to bring all that back here to Hawaii and help lead an organization. We've been around since 1999. eWorld's been helping state and local government companies along with commercial organizations with IT transformation. So, some of the more notable ones recently with Safe Travels in partnership with Google and ETS. We've also helped out with Department of Health and Department of Human Services and the Department of Labor when it comes to these chatbots. So it's been a game changer, and one of the things that you achieve is to try to get the callers or the clients to get the information they need quickly. And one of the ways to do that is with using artificial intelligence through a chatbot. So I've got my team here, and my team at eWorld comprises of Dean Ramos, who's our project manager that oversees many of our call center implementations. We got our lead developer, Gary Huang, and then we've got a couple of our developers, Ethan Chow, Dean Fujimoto, Iowane Amarad, and then we've got Jordan Iwase, and then we've got Eric Dutton, who helps out with a lot of our testing. And I also want to introduce Daniel, who's with Google. They've been an awesome partner with us as we help the state with various, COVID and non-COVID projects leveraging Google. So without further ado, I wanted to introduce Daniel Liu from Google.
Hey, thank you, Joe. Good morning, everyone. Nice to meet you all. I think I know a lot of you. There's Daniel Liu. I'm a customer engineer with Google. And in the last 20 plus years with IT, I've been spending about the 15 years for the state of Hawaii. So I really consider here as my really second home here. So I know we have a pretty tight agenda today in the next 2 hours. So let me just start sharing my slide deck here. Can you guys see my slide deck here? Oh, good. Awesome. So what we can spend, let's just take a look at our agenda quickly for the next 2 hours. I will start with just a quick start on how to using Quick Labs. I think most of you have received the emails yesterday from Michelle, which you probably already have a quick a jump start, have registered your quick labs. But for those of you who have just registered yesterday, no worry, we're still going to go over this process quickly. As we have our machine learning and AI overview, you will still have time to quickly register for yourself. And then, so the agenda, we will spend our first hour just really talking about machine learning and AI in general, the overview. The idea of which is really those are the key technology that will enable our dialogue flow and chatbot. So my goal is for the first hour, you guys all become the expert in machine learning and AI, just in theory only. And then, of course, the second hour, we actually going to open the labs, and you will have your own environment, and you can do really a hands-on lab within, probably depends on how quickly you're, some people are really, I've seen people finish this in 30 to 45 minutes to build your own chatbot for a service bot. And so that's really the goal. So by the end of 2 hours, you all become expert in chatbot and the machine learning AI. And then we'll open with a QA towards the very end. When I finish my AI, we're also going to have an e-word to demo some of the CCAI voice bot they have built for the state. So let's, first thing first, let's just, for those of you who have not registered with Quick Labs, so you can go to this website, which is called google.quicklabs.com. Once you're in there, if you look at the very top, right, if you already have signed for the accounts, you can just sign in, or you can just sign in. But if you have not have account yet, you can just click join on the top right side, and then you just input your first name, last name, giving your email address, and then you will receive an email notifications, right? You'll set your own password, and then you can just log into the Quick Labs environment. And this is the screen you will see once you log into your Quick Lab environment. It does provide hundreds of those hands-on labs you can play with. A lot of those are with the Google Cloud technology. Some of those are free and Google provides. Some of those does require you either pay for that, or we provide you some free tokens. And I think Michelle has distributed those yesterday. You should receive email. If you have not received those tokens yet, no worry about it. Just text Michelle, and she will provide those for you before the lab starts. And if you're in the environment, even after we finish today's boot camp, you can still there's a whole set of library of labs. If you're interested in any specific topics, feel free to play with those. And if there's any topics you are really interested in, please let us know. Let eWord and Google knows. And I think we have a few more true events that's follow up. One on the security side, cybersecurity. The dates have not been determined yet, but there's another one on other AI technology. There will be some labs that will follow. So let us know what is your interest, and we can definitely provide you further educations and hands-on exercise. And then there's also some quick tools on the Quick Labs. You can go through that. We'll spend a bit more time towards the second part of this bootcamp here. Now, let's have a quick overview on what AI machine learning is about. This is really the foundation of how we're building a chatbot on top of that. So before I start, I'm going to just turn this out quickly to Ding. If you can play this video, I have some issue early on with the sound. So I'm going to stop sharing and may have Ding to play this quicker video. This is about 5 minutes. This will give you a really great overview on what machine learning and AI is, and how is it going to impact our day-to-day life. Ding, I handle this over to you here.
As a kid, I was really inspired by the explorers. I grew up in Seattle, and Lewis and Clark were kind of heroes locally. And I wanted to be an explorer when I grew up. As an electrical engineer, I would always look for new things that we can do that just weren't ever possible. And machine learning and research is an exploration. It feels like an intellectual exploration.
We've definitely seen a big uptake in the last 5 years in what machines are able to do compared to, say, the previous decade or two.
With the advent of a lot more data and a lot more computing power, we really can think bigger and sort of change the game about what kind of models we can envision.
The real world is actually very messy. Hard logical rules are not the way to solve real-world problems.
So machine learning is all about learning from examples.
Rather than writing 500,000 lines of code, we instead have the machine learn from observations about the world.
And we look through a bunch of these examples in the machine learning algorithm, maybe millions, maybe billions, maybe even trillions, to identify the patterns and generalize from there.
In the task of image recognition, we've been able to train models to take the pixels of an image and from those pixels learn high-level features.
It starts to learn that if you see a cake and you see a kid, it's maybe a birthday party. If you see a cake and lots of kids, it's very likely a birthday party. That's essentially teaching the machines to do the perceptions that we humans are so natural and so good at.
You realize just how amazing humans are, just how amazing your 4-year-old is who can recognize faces.
Machine learning has really been the beginning of a big revolution in the field of speech recognition.
To teach speech recognition, how to interact with a noisy room. We used real-world sounds, and we mix it into the examples that we already have.
Is it cold outside? Is it cold outside? Is it cold outside?
Now, no matter what the noise in the environment, our speech recognition systems can understand what you're saying. They can separate out one speaker from another.
With machine learning, we have now an algorithm that learns how to simulate a human linguist.
A lot of the language that we see today, it's very informal.
Blah, 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 blah. And they say, okay.
Interspersed with emojis and stickers. Now, with Google, we're getting to the point where you can have a much more natural conversation.
Any good Mexican places around here?
Here you go.
The assistant product that we're building at Google uses the best of our machine learning techniques in speech recognition, image understanding, natural language understanding.
That's a promising direction for developing systems that can really navigate the mess of the real world. We wanted to make this an open source project so that everyone outside of Google could use the same system we're using inside Google.
There are lots of people who have made very, very creative uses of it without knowing a single bit of machine learning. So if they have the ideas, they don't need to do the heavy lifting that we've already done.
I saw a cool example where somebody used to have a cat going around their house all the time. So they trained a model to identify whenever the cat was there, and they would turn the sprinklers on to scare the cat away.
This elderly couple in Japan who ran a cucumber farm, and one of the big tasks is to sort the cucumbers into like prickly ones, less prickly ones, straight ones, curved ones. And it's actually a complicated task. So the wife would spend many hours a day sorting cucumbers. So the son picked up a computer vision model and was able to build a system to categorize the cucumbers and sort them automatically. All the time wasted sorting cucumbers is just going to be used in much better ways.
387 million people with diabetes are at risk for diabetic retinopathy. It causes blindness. The way that you can find signs of diabetic retinopathy is by taking pictures of the back of the eye. But there's just simply not enough doctors, and it takes hours for an interpretation. So we trained an algorithm that can read the images right then and there. The algorithm can help the doctors get more people screened for the disease.
The more you see machine learning and the kinds of things it can do, the more you see opportunity for it to improve people's lives.
You can use machine learning to save power at significant scales, even track the spread of diseases and epidemics.
We could use a computer vision model for everyone who's visually impaired.
We could make speech recognizer for everyone on the planet and drastically improve the experience of millions and billions of people.
I don't see any area of science or even of human endeavor that learned systems can't help with.
If you'd asked me a few years ago if a computer would be able to do this anytime soon, I would have said, I don't really think so.
It's very, very empowering to imagine what's going to come.
We're thinking thoughts and doing things that, no man has ever done, and sort of setting forth and setting foot in really new intellectual territory here.
The promise of AI and machine learning is that we can actually produce solutions to previously unsolved problems that will really help people.
I think I'll hand it off to Daniel now.
Thank you, Dean. So as you can see from this quick video clips that, machine learning is no longer something that we were reading when we were a child, right? A robot may be acting like a human, but it is really live in our everyday life, whether it's in healthcare or in a lot of those very practical use cases here. So let's just kind of level set a little bit on how we understand what is AI and what is machine learning, right? So AI, artificial intelligence, is really a big concept that creates intelligent machines that can think like human, talk like human. This is sometimes we call artificial intelligence. It's really training machine to think and behave like human beings. And then what is machine learning, right? So machine learning is really a subset of what a whole AI spectrum is all about. So what that is, it takes a lot of data that's in there. And then by using those data, we can kind of do predictions and make decisions for us based on the things that the data we collect. There's a huge difference in terms of machine learning than our traditional approach, as we, some of us being in IT for decades, right? Where we have to tell the machine specifically, give instructions on what to do. Where machine learning is very different. Machine learning is what I call the self-learning based on the data that's coming. It can do a lot of self-learning by using some of those machine learning models, right? So machine learning is a very specific field of AI, where a system can learn and find some patterns, for example, in order to make some predictions for the future. Computer learns how to do a task without really being specifically programmed or telling them to do so, right? You might understand if you're a programmer, in your early days, when we start programming, you always put a flow chart, right? Like put a flow chart on decision tree. If this condition matches, then I'm going to do this. If not, then I'm going to do the other one, right? So the if-then statement is as a common practice of as we program and tell the machine what to do, right? But the challenge with that is there's only so many possibilities you can think of, right? And then remember, there's always those exceptions, right? For anything that does not fit into that particular category, then usually, unless we tell the machine explicitly what to do, the machine doesn't really know how to do, right? This is where we have this whole program set on how to handle those bugs, right? Exceptions, right? But machine learning is very different. It's self-learning, right? It can go totally out of the script for the things that you never tell the computer what to do, but they gradually, based on the data that feeds in, they learn how to do those tasks. So how we learn, machine learning is kind of like how we learn a native language, right? As a child, did we really learn the English grammar, right? As we learn the language? Probably not, right? It's the way how our parents is reading something, right? And if we saw a cat, right, and the kids say, well, that's a dog, then the parents will just correct them, that's a cat, right? So there's not a specific description of what a dog is look like versus what cat, right? That is going to be very, very difficult to comprehend in a child's mind, right? The easiest way is just a picture. You tell them that's a dog, that's a cat. Eventually we'll learn how to make our decisions. So machine learning allows us to solve a problem really without codifying a solution, right? So it can recognize data patterns. It can predict analytic at a very, very large scale, right? There's a big difference I'm talking about later on as we're talking about machine learning, we need to feed lots of data there, and then we need to do a lot of automatic data analysis, which also means that there are huge amount of infrastructure behind the scene to process all those data in order for the machine to help us to make those decisions for us. And then Google provides what I call an end-to-end AI spectrum. So what I mean by that is, I will get a little bit deep into it, is on the left side, we provide you a set of what I call the machine learning libraries called TensorFlow. Those are very specific for if you are in really advanced machine learning researchers, right? You can build your own models, right? For example, the example you saw on the video clips, right? How to use a machine to recognize like even cucumber, like, the shape of those, right? Sort those things out. So you can actually using TensorFlow to write your own machine learning modules, right? But that sometimes is too difficult, right? So then on the right side is Google has trained a pre-built models, right? We're using a lot of those data, right? For a specific field, we're training those models to recognize those patterns. So all you have to do is just feeding the data in there, and then using the pre-built models, we can help you to make those predictions without having you to build your own models. But then sometimes in between, because the model that Google provides for you may not be good enough, right? Let me use an example of, let's say, a translation, right? Translation is also using AI technology. Instead of giving very specific grammar, right? Translate a language from, let's say, English to Spanish, right? We're just feeding a lot of those sentence language into the model. Eventually, the model will learn how to speak Spanish. But sometimes we have different regions speak different dialects, right? So if you want to train the model to understand a specific area of the Spanish dialects, then you might need to retrain your models by feeding different accents and different language dictions for that particular area, right? This is somewhere fair in the middle where you can, base on a pre-built model, but provide additional data sets so you can customize train the model to make it look like the way how you want it, right? One of the example, I'm using language again. If you have the machine to learn a lot of Shakespeare, right? And eventually that machine will talk like people that lives maybe 400 or 500 years old, right? Or if you're feeding a bunch of modern American dialects there, and the people will talk very different like a teenager, right? So it's very different. So that's somewhere in between. So move on. This is a picture of overall what AI solution will look like, right? At the very bottom, as we're talking about, we need to process lots of information. So you need to have infrastructure that will support that, right? So traditionally you have CPUs, right? You may also heard of a GPU. GPU is very specifically to process large graphic information. But as we're dealing with machine learning, and we need a lot more computing power. So Google also provide another type of CPU, which is made by Google. A lot of people don't know that Google is also a hardware chip company too. We don't sell any chips. We are only using for our own data center build. But the TPU is called TensorFlow Power Processing Unit. That is specifically, it has a very powerful data processing power. That's usually about 7 years ahead of the traditional CPU computing power. And it can process a huge amount of information that is built specifically for AI machine learning specific, right? So moving from the infrastructure layer to what I call the AI platform, right? When we're talking AI platform, we're talking about you can using TensorFlow, using your own infrastructure to train your own models, build your own models, right? Versus you can using those pre-built models. But we provide a whole infrastructure in terms of TensorFlow compute engines that will allow you to do all those computations, right? Feeding in just a large amount of data, right? Sometimes you might need not just small sets of data, right? Petabytes of data, process those, recognize pattern recognitions. And then on top of that, you see there are two layers, the auto ML and the pre-built API. We're getting a little bit deep into that. Pre-built API, that means that those model has built for you, so you just can use that. And the bottom is somewhere in between. If I want to using an existing model, but I want to using my new data to improve this model, right? This is where it comes in. So that is the difference between those two. And then from machine learning perspective, they are very specific area, right? In terms of how we processing language, in terms of how we maybe detect objects and be able to going through a video to figure out the information that one needs to search for, right? So there are many sub area of machine learning. And today, as we're talking about the chatbot, specifically, it is a subset of the solution that we provide, right? So on top of that is industrial solution based use on those technology. Specifically, we're going to touch today is about a chatbot, first of all, and then in the context of a call center, I think eWater is going to provide you some examples of how we're using the AI machine learning specifically for using chatbot and language processing in a call center context. So this is what we're talking about, right? The two red box I highlight out. One of the technology we're talking about behind the chatbot is Dialog Flow, right? And then in terms of the solution, specifically we're addressing for a call center. As COVID hits right now, a lot of places, right, where you cannot go visit, whether you want to fill your application for your DMV applications, maybe employment benefits and all that. When office closes, when you're trying to call those places, they might only have 10, 20 people that's, you know, a live person that will answer those calls, but the call is overwhelming coming. So how can we take advantage of those technology to have a machine talk like a human beings, right? Be able to answer all your requests. So this is what we talk about. And the second part of this, today's workshop bootcamp, you will learn how to build a chatbot on your own in less than an hour, right? Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what is chatbot and dialog flow. I'll give you a very high level overview here. There are different definitions about what is chatbot, what is voice bot. You may heard a lot of those, right? I would say the best way to describe that is called digital assistant, right? Because chatbot is just a way people how to describe things. In a nutshell, it is really a machine can have some kind of communication or human interactions. A machine using AI technology can communicate to you through some kind of channel, right? Whether it is you using Google Homes, right? Sometimes if you go out, you say, hey, Google, what's the weather today, right? Google in action, you may learn some of those. So the difference between a chatbot, a voice bot, is really a way how you communicate with a machine, right? Whether go through voice, whether you can just going through a typing at a text, right? But at the end, you need to have this two-way conversation with a robot, a human, right? So that two-way communication is using a technology called dialog flow. That's what we're talking about. That's a conversation you can have to have the machine think like a human, to have a human conversation with you, right? And all those technology are service technology that is sitting on Google's cloud platform, which means that it's serverless. You don't have to do any installation. It's really easy to use. And that's the reason why you can really build a chatbot really quickly in 30 minutes, right? So this is really an overall picture, right? Right in the middle, as you see on this picture here, this is the dialog flow. Dialog flow is a service, cloud service technology that will allow you to have this two-way communication, right, with the machine. And then the way how you communicate to the machine, right, there are different ways. You can go through text, you can go through any type of digital voice, right? And whether you go through your car, mobile apps, TV, Google Homes, or you can just by calling, right? a call center phone number. Sometimes you have 800 numbers, but the different experience is that instead of you receive a call, say, well, press 1 for this, press for that, right? For those actions, you may actually have a meaningful conversation. On the other end, you will have a human-like voice. They'll say, hey, Daniel, how can I help you today, right? Well, I need to maybe find out how do I apply for renew my driver's license, for example, right? I need to figure out I might travel to Hawaii and what kind of COVID tests or requirements do I need? And then the machine on the other side was, oh yes, of course, Daniel, I can help you with that, right? So here is, I need additional information so you can have a really meaningful conversation with a machine. You can go totally out of script. Not only that, you can speak different language. You can speak even with the strong accents, and the machine can understand you instead of the earlier version. People thinking about chatbot is not as good because they think that talks like Arnold Schwarzenegger, the Terminators, right? That's not the case. Now, not only that, on the right side, there is a terminology called fulfillment. But in a nutshell, it is you can communicate through Google Cloud Platform with microservices and infrastructure to get into any of your legacy system, whether it's a CRM system, whether it's Active Directory or any other system. For example, if I want to renew my license, right? If my DME record is in, let's say, a mainframe system, right? The first thing when I have that conversation with AI, a robot, it needs to go back into a mainframe system to retrieve my information out, right? To validate who I am first before we can have the next meaningful conversation. So security is also in place. And then on the right side, I want to talk about is there's also technological sentiment analysis, because especially when you, for a call center, for example, right? As we collect all those voice conversations, sometimes as an organization, I want to make sure that I want to know whether my customer is calling is happy. Did I resolve that problem, right? Because it's not just by the vocabulary sometimes, but also by the way how their voice reacts. And those insights we can collect and help us to improve those services by using those chatbots. Now, as we today we're building this, even in the next hour, you're going to have some hands-on experience how to use in Dialog Flow, right? To build your own chatbot or voice bot. The difference between chatbot and voice bot, it doesn't really have that much a difference. It's just the way how you go through typing versus when you speak to it, right, to a machine. So I want to level set on some of the definition we're talking about here. First thing is in Dialog Flow, there's a concept of agent. Agent is kind of like thinking about, sometimes you call a virtual agent, is really a robot, a machine that is like a human, right? It's a virtual human that's sitting over there trying to help you to answer your questions, your request. That's what agent is, right? Now, the agent will answer your questions, right? So user will have those called utterance, which means, well, they will say something to the agent, right? In order to get a response. But you may have different type of request. So each request is an intent. That makes sense? Each request is intent. So when you're building a virtual agent, a virtual human robot, right? And it needs to understand what kind of question might come in, right? So all those questions are intent. Now, what our training phase is within each intent is really the way how people are talking to the machine, right? Because in the traditional programming, without using AI, if I say, if the person say hello, I will respond. What about if the person say hi? What the person say, how are you doing? I have to write a huge if statement, right? Because I don't know how people were reading the machine here, right? But as a human being, we can comprehend, right? Different people will say different things. In Hawaii, we'll say aloha, right? But the machine have to understand all that. So those training phases means that we will take all those data, training that, so that when people have this greeting, they will understand all those language, right? That's called the training phase. And then based on the training phase, you're gonna have a reaction, right? By reply back to the users, right? those are the action and response. So those are some of the definition we're talking about, right? So some of the definition just kind of construct level set on this, right? Intent, utterance, entity, and context. So we kind of talk about intent, utterance. What is the other two, right? So intent, as I'm talking about, is really what do you want to do? What do you want to write? A specific request to the virtual agent, or I need to have a coffee, right? Go get coffee, that's the intent, right? I want to make an appointment, right? Make an appointment, that doctor's appointment, that's intent, right? Or if a service desk, you actually today will build a chatbot on service desk, right? So someone says, well, my laptop is broken, right? That's intent. Intent is what? Tech support, right? People can say different things. Well, my laptop is not working, right? You can say all different things, but intent is really, I need some help to fix my laptop. And then utterance is just the way how you communicate, right? Say, hello, how can I help you, right? It triggers a conversation, right? And then entity is really what I call sometimes the parameters, right? Because as you building your training phases, you say, well, my name is Daniel, my name is Lily. That name is really what? An entity, so you can pass in parameters. So a system parameter, the machine will understand. So it doesn't have to program it specifically. So, well, I only understand my name is Daniel, but when people say my name is Lily, then the machine doesn't know how to act, right? So those are the entity that will feed into your machine, which include, dates and a lot of different entity you built. And the context is also very important, because when I'm saying context is the difference between an AI conversation versus just a pre-trained conversation is sometimes if you are the two persons having conversation, right? If you just walk into that conversation, someone says something, you might get totally lost because you don't have what? The context of your previous conversation, right? Context is really based on your previous conversation that you will understand, right? What is next thing, right? So when two persons have a conversation, like I'm calling a help support desk, right? So my desktop is broken and all that. So, and then the later question will be, well, what exactly is the problem, right? Are you having issue with your memory or something, right? Can you reboot your machines? But if I just heard a sentence in the middle of that conversation, I have no idea what that person's talking about, right? So it's important that the context is understand the previous intent. So I understand a continuing conversation behind this. So that's context, right? So kind of put those together, right? A virtual agent, as you build those, right, can be a voice bot and chatbot. And then it's made of the intent, which are made of multiple training phases as you train the machine with lots of data, right? And knows how to respond to your questions and to be able to answer those. But between intent to intent, because sometimes you can have a very long conversation, a single intent, the next intent is based on the previous intent. This is where context comes in to make the dot of connection so you can continue on that conversation, right? And then with Dialog Flow, we actually have built a lot of those called like pre-built agents. So if you go there, if you want to just build something like a hotel booking, food delivery, right? We have those built for you. So you can just borrow those. Or you can build a brand new virtual agent for yourself, right? And then there's also a one-click integration with most of those open platforms, right? Whether it's Google Assistant, Facebook Messenger, Slack, right? Any popular things, Twitters, you can embed the chatbot or the virtual agent you just built, integrate with all those popular common communication platforms you can use, right? So it's very, very convenient, right? And then one thing people are using quite a lot is called a knowledge connectors. What knowledge connectors is typically using for a lot of those websites, right? For example, Safe Travel app is a perfect example of people travel to Hawaii, right? Because I can either call help desk support, right? Have a virtual agent answer my call. If I'm lucky, I might get a live person. But sometimes I'm on the website as I'm booking my trips to Hawaii. it would be good to just have a chatbot that can answer the most frequent asked questions, right? Instead for me to reading pages of those articles, all those questions, if I just type what documents do I need when I travel to Hawaii, right? So this is the knowledge base we can using the frequent asked question article to feeding into the chatbot so that you can just embed this technology on your website, right? People come in, they can just help them to answer the most frequent asked questions here, right? And the other thing I want to talk about is Google does support lots of language. We support about 180 different type of language. Just locally Hawaii, I think we support about somewhere close to 16 different language. I think I did a question earlier where someone asked a question, I think sent to Michelle earlier, is like, there are other vendors that have very similar technology. So how Google's Dialog Flow technology is, how is that different from other technology? I will say, there are many things in detail, but on a very high level, two things, right? As we're talking about, AI will require process a huge amount of information. So you need to have a huge infrastructure to feeding a lot of those language. The more data you have, the better your result is going to be, right? So in order to have this really huge infrastructure, including we're talking about the specific, not CPU, but TensorFlow TPU, that is about 7 years ahead of future to process a large amount of information, right? And there's only 11 applications on the planet that has over 1 billion users. Google owns 9 of those, right? So you think about the amount of technology, just think about like Google search, right? As you type those words, sometimes you don't even spell things right or know exactly what to ask, right? It's very different than you doing Google search 10 years ago, because there's a lot of AI technology comes in, help you to complete that sentence, right? Even you misspelled, doesn't even know what question to ask. So in order to make those chatbot AI machine learning way better, you need to have a lot of infrastructure supported process, a lot of data. The second thing is in terms of, especially we're talking about a communication tool, right? Talking to a robot, be able to understand not only a few language, but lots of language, right? Be able to understand different type of accents, right? So those are some of the advantages of using Google's chatbot. And then another thing I'm talking about is really in terms of the sentiment analysis, because that is huge, for especially for call center, right? I need to understand a lot of times when COVID hits, I only have 10 people supporting this call center, right? A lot of calls being waiting for hours, right? You have a lot of call just deflect, people won't even get someone on a call, right? So people sometimes get frustrated. It'll be nice to have those statistics, right? In terms of how many calls is coming, how many calls being answered, did I answer other questions that people ask for it? Are they happy? What type of question are they asking for, right? And how many questions actually, as people actually get it routed into a real person to answer those questions, right? So it's good to have those analysis. You can actually see the chat. We have some of those employment benefit call center. One example is for the state of Illinois. eWater is probably going to provide you, they have implemented probably at least 6, 7 of those local call center technology for different departments over here. It's like the overwhelming of the call initially, it was accumulated, people get frustrated calling days, weeks, but it's all get answered by virtual agent. And you can, all those analysis, see the drop of those calls, and people, even their call voice is getting better because they're more happy with the services for the call center, right? So just kind of put them together, right? So chatbot in a nutshell is, sometimes people say virtual agent, virtual bot, right? It's really a way to communicate with the machine, right? To have this free format, talking like a human beings. You can chat, you can type, right? You can also calling, and then backend, you can interface with any of the legacy or modern systems in the back. And then just really quickly, from a chatbot Dialog Flow perspective, how is this going to put into what I call a conversational core AI technology? Sometimes we brief it called CCAI, right? So there are really 3 things here. Virtual agent is really, it can using the same technology to interface with your existing call center technology, your IVR system. It doesn't matter. Google is really open source so that you can put this AI technology on top of an existing IVR system, call center technology, right? So instead of have the traditional press one, press two, now you have a virtual agent talk like a human beings, be able to answer all your calls, right? But not all the calls can be answered by a virtual agent, a robot. Sometimes you do need to have a live agent, but 90% of the call are already being handled by the virtual agent. The 10% of the call has been answered by a live agent. But sometimes a live agent may not know all answers, right? What's the time you actually, after waiting for the call for, listen to the music for 30 minutes, after finally talking to a live agent, the live agent will ask a lot of questions. The person may not know that question, maybe transfer to a different department, maybe put you on hold to listen to the music one more time. I hope it's a good music. And then also let me check with my supervisor because I need to do some research to answer your call, right? With agent assist, there's a set piece of technology on top of that, is that it will capture all the conversation you had with the virtual agent. So I don't have to ask the question over and over again. But not only that, there's a knowledge-based things I talked about earlier. It will actually bring the answers in the screen in front of a live human being, and then they can really reading through those knowledge-based answers to answer those calls for you, right? So it will make their life a lot easier. Instead of they do research for them, but now they can actually just read the answer back, right, to you. So you don't have to be on the call waiting for another 10 minutes. And then the bottom piece is what we call insight. Insight is really about do all those AI machine analysis so that we can really help the call center to improve their services, right? So we can get better. We understand what type of question they're asking about, right? And things we have not thinking about. We will see over time whether the call is, instead of spend average people spend 10 minutes, now 3 minutes will be to answer the call, right? To answer all the questions that a person has. So the technology that put all those together, right? At the interaction at the bottom we're talking about, it's a dialog flow. It's a two-way conversation, right, with a machine. But when you speak, right, we need to translate your human language into a machine language so they understand. So the first top part is understand. So that's called speech to text, right? Google has the ability to understand different language, different accents, right? So different kind of what we call training phases, so you can understand those, right? That is translate your human voice into machine language that machine can understand process, right? Then you go through dialog flow, have this two-way conversation, and the machine needs to talk back, right? So talk back is called text to speech. That's the second technology, right? Which is really to translate the machine language talking back to the human in a human language. It can be all different type of language, right? You can speak Chinese, Filipino, Spanish, right? All different type of local, language too. So those are the three things that makes up the CCAI, a human technology. So kind of in a nutshell put together, right? You can see the virtual agent is really under the cover is what? Dialog flow, right? It's made of those three pieces of technology, right? Text to speech to text, which is really translate machine language into a human language into a machine language, have this two-way conversation so that you can either using a chatbot, a voice bot to have this conversation, right? From a call center perspective, agent assist is really assist agent, right? To have those answers more quickly getting to the user. And then inside is really all those advanced analytics to help us to identify, how can we improve our service from a call center perspective. And then some additional feature, right? So talking about, this is no compare. Sometimes people want to draw comparison. How is this AI-enabled call center different from the traditional call center, right? Traditional call center is even you have a pre-recorded, right? welcome to Kaiser Permanente, right? I'm not, Kaisers are doing much better. I'm just using them, for example, because I call them all the time. But now you have a very human-like voice instead of a pre-recorded voice, right? It is not rule-based. What I mean by that is the voice bot can really totally go out of script. It's AI power, right? For example, if you go to McDonald's, order something or order some food, right? So I'll have a number 3, right? A Big Mac meal, right? Which if it's pre-programmed, rule-based, the machine totally understand it. What about if you're driving through it, your kids in the back will say, hey, mom, dad, I want to have this action toy. All of a sudden the machine don't know because it's not part of the pre-programmed rule-based, right? So the AI difference is that the machine will talk about, oh yeah, what kind of toy do you want, right? That's called AI enabled versus a rule-based traditional one, right? And the speech is very human-like, right? Sometimes I haven't getting into all the details, but it's auto-tune means that sometimes people might have those smartphones, have those taking pictures, but there are new technology. When you take a picture, especially I think for a lot of people, they want to look younger, right? So the real picture may be auto-tuned to look a lot younger than your real people, but we can do the same thing for the voice. Sometimes when you hear yourself on the voice recording, you say, well, I didn't sound that good, right? Because in a live room where you're talking to people, you sounds good, but sometimes when we don't sound too good on a voice call, right? So they actually can auto-tune to make it sound better on those voice calls, right? And then, of course, the last part is we have this knowledge base to really enable this virtual agent to working a lot better, efficient. So that's just like a picture of what a sentiment analysis will look like from an inside perspective. This is basically a AI machine learning overview specifically for chatbot and the voice bot and CCAI context in general. And next, I will hand over to the eWorld team to have them talk about some of the use cases, a demo, and how they have done for Hawaii to building some of those cool technologies to help local citizens here. With that, I'm going to hand back to Joe.
All right, thanks, Daniel. Appreciate it. So what I'll do next is I'm going to just get my team here, and Dean, if you could kind of help facilitate this part and introduce the team, and then we can go from there.
Sure. Let me turn on my video so you guys see that I am a person and not just a voice coming through the internet. So yeah, I'm Dean. We got our team that Joel introduced earlier that range from developers to QA testers, and it's actually a good blend of folks who actually came through the call center ranks. So I believe the majority of our team members like Ethan and Eric, Dean Fujimoto and Ioane were actually call center reps that was learning about the specific subjects that our call centers were supporting. So in a timely fashion, it's September 1st, and I think it's Safe Travel's birthday. I remember I'm reminiscing on Joel, myself, and Ethan at the airport, helping out the screeners who were greeting travelers and helping them out use the Safe Travels website. So I bring that up because I feel like it's a good segue into us diving into the examples that we have, because Safe Travels was the first project we had to implement a virtual agent. So back then, let me share my screen real quick, because I got a few stats and they're more up to date within the last 30 days. So just 3 of our projects that are currently active right now. Safe Travels at the moment, the last 30 days, we've been getting about 2.2 average calls a day. So that's 2,000 calls with, I think about 10 at any given hour, 10 reps answering phone calls. And we use ServiceNow and Google CCAI to analyze the data that's coming in. So we're using Safe Travels as the demo. Ethan's gonna do a quick demo using 2 cases. PBT call center, that's slowed down at 60 average calls a day, but we really have about 1 or 2 reps per hour available. And for the most part, the virtual agent tries to troubleshoot the calls for the caller's issues. And then DOH, that's about 200 average calls a day. And we store a lot of the data that we collect and analyze using BigQuery and Google CCAI. So just wanted to share those stats real quick so you guys get the context of what's real world application. So if you want to imagine you got a team of 3 people that has to answer 1,000 calls like right away, it's good to have the virtual agent available to answer very general calls, because the way I've described the situation as far as call centers go with our team is there is a sea of information out there, and a lot of people are they're worried or concerned, or they want to find out from a source what they have to do. And in the case of Safe Travels last year, when we rolled out the pre-tests, I think we were getting about 20,000 calls with about the same amount of team members. So the virtual agent helped out a lot with trying to divert, or not necessarily divert's probably not the best word, but lead people into where they could find their answers. So a current example right now is DOH. They get 200 calls a day. Primarily, they should be answering questions about vaccines. However, they do get calls about travel. And one of the intents that we've built into the DOH is when the virtual agent asks, "How can I help you?" and someone says, "Oh, I want to get a vaccine for travel." Travel is one of the key words that the virtual agent listens for and then forwards them over to Safe Travels. So let's see. I wanted to pull up the chat to see if there's any questions so far before we dive into the demo. How do we integrate Google Chatbot into our voice over IP phone system? Okay. How do we add? How can a regular staff update modify the ongoing services in the chatbot without IT help? So these questions, in our instances, we have the virtual agent in place before it goes to an IVR, or it kind of acts as an IVR or a secretary. That's how I've described it to some of our team, because basically the virtual agent is there to say, to pick up the phone and say, "How can I help you?" And depending on the situation, for example, Safe Travels, which you guys will listen in the demo, we use the data that we've collected to identify top questions that people have, so that people will be more inclined to listen to the instructions to the virtual agent versus just straight up asking for representative. That's one thing that we noticed. A lesson learned that we had was a lot of people, yeah, they want to talk to a human being. They still have some sense of, okay, I'm talking to a robot, but in other cases, that's where you have to look at the instances, put it into production, see what's working and what's not working, and actually modify, or I guess reprogram how the virtual agent is greeting the person. Let's see, just that's the phone system. As far as the chatbot goes, it's really simple code, and I can I can show you that example. So on hawaiicovid19.com, vaccine-facts, DOH actually was able to help us get their virtual agent onto the vaccine FAQ page. So sorry, I'm getting a lot of messages from people. I should mute this or exit. So it's just some HTML code that you can place in, and it'll show up here in the corner. You'd have to work with someone who has access to the website. So that's how we add Google Chatbot onto the website. And the neat thing is, you see this, and let me try to zoom in because I know my screen. Oh, am I still sharing my screen? Sorry.
No.
Hey Gene, by the way, while you're doing that, let me just elaborate real quick on the Voiceover Ip services.
Sure,
so
sure.
It really depends on the system that you have. So with Dialog Flow Gateway, there is a gateway that you can use. So it depends on the type of VoIP system you have, whether it's 5.9 Cisco or, in some cases we're using Ring Central or Zoom. So it really depends on your VoIP system, if it provides web services, and if it does provide that gateway. So I guess the answer is it depends. So if you want to talk about that specifically offline in terms of your situation, feel free to send me a direct message.
Sure. So now that I got this zoomed and sharing my screen, you can see that when I go to hawaiicovid19.com/vaccine FAQs, there's a little icon here that I can open up, and this is the actual chatbot for DOH that we developed. What I was going to point out is it greets me. Aloha, I am a virtual assistant with the Hawaii State Department of Health and can help with vaccine related questions. How can I help you? This is pretty much the same virtual agent as the one that would answer DOH's hotline. So the neat thing that Daniel pointed out earlier during his presentation is that you can have an agent, but then it can be programmed to respond differently, whether it's on a phone call or a web chat. So any question that I ask here, there would be an equivalent response if I called up the phone number and asked the same question. Nice thing about this is you can program buttons to show what are the topics I can ask about. So if I click this, it'll give some examples of all the topics that you can ask the virtual agent about. The equivalent of this on the phone call is the virtual agent will prompt, you can ask me about topics. And I would say on the phone, tell me what topics I can ask about in case I don't know what to ask about. So for example, lost vaccine card, that's an intent. And if I click that, I'll get my answer about, at least the initial answer about lost vaccine cards. And it'll step me through what kind of questions that DOH helped us determine to program into the virtual agent. So if I lost a vaccine card, it's gonna ask where did I get my vaccine? Where were you vaccinated at? Which area? So I would say something like University of Hawaii. Wait, sorry, I might have been reading this. Oh, it's asking me a yes or no question. Were you vaccinated at the Windward Community College? So I'll type in yes. Okay. So yeah, it would just go through a series of questions depending on the intent. It's all up to the person programming the virtual agent. And then let's see. And as far as maintenance goes, there are solutions. Like Joel said, if you guys want to talk about questions like How can our regular staff update, modify the ongoing services in chatbot without IT help? That's one of those things that we try to do. We try to empower you guys with the technology and not necessarily have to have us all the time. So yeah, on that note, if there's no other questions, I'll pass it off to Ethan to show you guys how the virtual agent works via phone.
Hey everybody, this is Ethan. So I'm just going to do a quick demo of our Safe Travels virtual agent. And just as a little bit of a background information, Safe Travels is the program that everybody who's traveling into the state of Hawaii, they have to go through that. It's for the in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And so we have a call center that can answer questions about safe travels, and we also have this virtual agent. So I'm going to go ahead and call it, and you guys can go ahead and listen along. So I'm going to present just two really quick scenarios for the demo. And so the first one, just pretend we have a caller who is having trouble uploading documents to the Safe Travels website, and they're particularly confused about some of the things that they have to sign on the website. So I'm going to go ahead and call in and demo that.
Aloha. You've reached the Safe Travels Hawaii Service Desk. For English, say English. 日本語でのご案内をご希望の方は日本語とおっしゃってください。
English.
Are you having a problem uploading your vaccination documents to the Safe Travels website?
Yes.
Please note that both signature boxes need to be signed and accepted before submitting. If you are not signing on behalf of the minor, do not check the parent or guardian or power of attorney boxes. Just fill in the asterisk information, sign, accept, and submit. If you are not able to submit, please try again on another browser, device, or network if needed. How may I help you?
I'm having issues uploading my documents.
Have you successfully registered an account on the Safe Travels website at travel.hawaii.gov?
Yeah.
What issues are you having with the document upload? You can say things such as, I can't see my documents, or uploading file.
I'm uploading a file.
In order for your document to be accepted by the Safe Travels website, you must have an account. Document file format must be in PDF format and uploaded before your departure. If you are unaware or unsure how to obtain your test result in the correct format, please contact your test provider for further assistance. How else can I help?
That's all. Thank you.
Mahalo for calling.
Okay. So in that instance, that question that I had asked in the very beginning is a common question. So we actually have it asks you right up front, hey, are you having this issue? Because there's a bunch of people who also have this issue. And so we're just making it really easy for people to get answers. But, sometimes people call, they see a phone number and they're all confused. And sometimes they just want to speak to a human. They might say, oh, in my situation, I have these specific things, so I want to make sure that everything gets squared away. So folks just want to talk to a human, and so they can do that as well. And they can just ask, hey, can I speak with someone, and it'll do that. And so I'll go through that real quick as well.
The Safe Travels Hawaii Service Desk. For English, say English. 本語でのご案内をご希望の方は日本語とおっしゃってください。
English.
Are you having a problem uploading your vaccination documents to the Safe Travels website?
No.
How may I help you?
I'd like to speak with someone.
Would you like to speak with a representative?
Yeah.
To connect you to the appropriate representative, which of the following issues do you have? Website issues, technical issues, or none of the above?
None of these.
Have you visited these websites? Please feel free to visit www.hawaiicovid19.com/travel/FAQs and www.ets.hawaii.gov/travel-help for answers to travel questions regarding the Safe Travels website, COVID testing, and vaccination. Please remain on the line while I try to transfer you to a representative at Go Hawaii. Thank you for holding. Please.
Okay, so I'm going to hang up there so I don't actually get through to somebody. But there we have just a demonstration of how you can just right off the bat say, hey, I want to talk to somebody. Sometimes, that's the people calling in, that's what they want to do. And so we allow them to do that as well. Okay, and that's the end of the 2 scenario demo. So I'll toss it back over to Dean.
Emily Lee with how was it determined that having trouble uploading was the greatest friction point for Safe Travels? So because we've been monitoring, when we intake inquiries, all that data is stored. So whether it's a voicemail or email, or even our agents answering calls, we see it in our ticketing system. And not only that, but we also check in with the other teams that we work with, such as Go Hawaii, ETS, the airport, and we check to see, hey, what do you? We literally ask, what kind of questions are you guys getting? And I don't know if you guys ever came across that whole phrase of, it's a feeling, like, we heard this much. We go with our gut feeling, and then we check to see the data that we've collected to see if it's in alignment. And that's how we were able to determine that having trouble uploading was one of the bigger friction points. What's interesting is that as much as that was a symptom, the solution was the signature box. A lot of people were a little confused about the signature box on Safe Travels. So that's why we asked, are you having trouble uploading? And we've been measuring the success of that question by seeing how many people are getting transferred between yes or no. So if people were having trouble uploading and they said yes to that prompt, and there's less people being transferred to a live agent, then that's what we consider that as, okay, we're taking care of folks and resolving their question. Let's see. Ryan B, what does a chatbot like this cost to set up for a client? Is it a one-time fee or an ongoing cost because of the constant AI training?
No, it would really depend on the scope and size. I mean, it could be fairly lightweight, and cost could be fairly minimal. And, we could kind of do the pocket special depending on what your budget would be. Like, for example, some have either an in-house system and they're using Zoom or RingCentral, and others, they've got a full-blown call center solution. So I guess the answer is it would really depend on what your requirements would be. So if you you have specific requirements, I mean, we could definitely talk about it offline, and I can get you some pricing on what that would look like for you.
Okay. Regarding the maintenance, do we update the phone system and the chatbot separately?
Specific to that maintenance part, I think it's important. Although they could be either tightly or loosely coupled. When you're maintaining those systems, there's a lot of linkages in between. So I would recommend, being the fact that there is a potential for breakage from a operations perspective, change management wise, I would maintain each of those things separately, as opposed to kind of doing a change system wide, and in the event that there's having to roll it back, it just makes it a lot more complicated. So I mean, what we tend to do is we tend to do an infrastructure change one day, and then we can do for example, a dialog flow change another day, but I prefer not to do them together.
Emily Lee, if there's enough time at the end, I'm curious also to hear more about your process on creating the user flow. I guess what I can do is give you some context of how all of this developed last year or so. Basically, we didn't have a virtual agent until I think December or January, December of last year. And we started off as agents answering calls. And then I guess to make a long story short, we learned the hard way of how we were going to process things. It started off as, and we still do have these stand-up meetings with our virtual agent, not with our virtual agents, with our human agents, as well as have retro meetings with our customers who we've been helping with. So for example, Safe Travels, we have a retro meeting with the airport and ETS and Go Hawaii, because we've been working together on this to help people who are coming to Hawaii understand what they have to do for safe travel. So it's very, how do I describe this? We keep the communication up across all with everybody. So what happens is that we get feedback regularly, almost every day, or at least every day that everybody is available. And then once we get that feedback, that's when we decide, okay, what's going to be the best thing for the virtual agent to do. So we tried out very specific questions at the beginning to try to help the callers right away, and then we realized that took up a lot of time when we asked very specific questions. So, and then the other side of the spectrum is just making it completely open, where the virtual agent says, "Aloha, you've reached Safe Travels. What can I help you with?" That poses a different challenge, where as much as 2,000 calls seem like a lot, and that's not enough data to I guess train the virtual agent in one day what kind of questions pop up, because it's very variable. Like one day it's going to be about the document upload, the next day it's about whatever announcement there was in the media. So one of the things that we identified was people are going to either call about a technical question or a very general question, and that's actually one of the things that happens if when someone asks to reach out to a representative, it'll prompt the caller, "Oh, are you having a technical or a general question?" And so far, over time, over our experience, we see that that's been working out.
Things here. So I hope that for this time, everyone had their quick labs login, right? And then you also have your token ready. So on the very high level, the The lab we're going through is a very simple one. We're going to build a very quick chatbot, which will you'll ask for the help desk if you have any, uh, desk support issues, whether your laptop goes down, you need to reset your password, right? So you'll communicate through building this agent, or what I call a chatbot agent, using Dialog Flow, right? And you're going through some of your training phases. And then at the end of the lab, you build this chatbot. The chatbot is can actually have a conversation, say, well, hi, I need some help on my laptop, right? I have, then the process actually will open a ticket for you and it will writing back into a backend system, which is a database. So in this lab, there's a couple of things you will do. You will get a little bit familiar with the Google Cloud Console. You will see the Dialog Flow console too, where you can build your virtual agent and intent. And then in the console, I think that there's a few things you have to do, which is you will create a database first, so that later on, when your tick is open, your tick records is actually stored in that database, so you can actually go back and take a look at it too. A couple of things here, right? So in your environment, this is a lab. Once you get into the hands-on lab, the quick labs here, the lab is called Implementing an AI Chatbot with a Dialog Flow. The lab will last for a whole hour. So once you click on the right side, we're starting the lab, the clock ticks, right? And most of you should be able to finish the lab within an hour. I've seen people somewhere from 30 minutes to an hour can finish that lab. If you do happen to, there's another meeting jumps and you have to go somewhere else, the clock will still ticking. So if you pass that 1 hour, the lab will close by itself. And then you have to kind of restart your lab again, right? But of course, now if you finish the first 50%, you probably should go through that process the second time much quicker. So the idea is you will just finish this whole lab in one shot. And then on the right side, there's actually multiple, you see like there's a 100% now, it's a minus 100, right? Which means you haven't started the whole task. So as you making progress through this lab, it will actually give you some kind of status reports, right? There are different sections in the labs. As you're reading through and start working on those, it will give you stats that you're like 80% done with the lab, you're almost 100% done with the lab, right? Another thing to look at is, since there are two different ways you can, there are two different type of labs. One is a lab that in Quick Lab that's free, but this is a pay lab. So we provide you those tokens. The token it's a 16-digit number, will break down into like 4 digits by 4 chunks. So you probably just want to copy paste those. There's like 5 lines, 5 tokens. Each token has 16 digits in there. I think you only need to really getting the first token, copy in there, and then this lab will take 5 tokens, but it remembers in sequence of what are the next 5 token is. So all you need is really copy paste the first token, which has made of 4 parts, 4 digits each. Just copy those in there, and then you say launch your access code, and then you will see the Star Lab starting very soon. And then another thing to look at is once you start a lab, it is very important to do a couple of things here. One is it opens, the clock is ticking here, right? And then the other thing is it opens, there's a link here, say open Google Cloud Console. What that does is you will log into the Google Cloud Console, and then you will need to enter your username, password, and a project ID. So every person have their own project in this lab environment. I would strongly suggest that you copy, paste those in a separate notebook somewhere. Have your username, password, and the project ID. You may need to use that later, so just know you don't have to come back. Just copy those out. And the other thing is, if you have been into Quick Labs before, let me remember you. For this lab, you may create a new ID for yourself. In order to avoid any type of confusion, I would suggest that when you open the Google Console, open in that in a incognito window, so that if you do have access to some other accounts in Google Console, it won't confuse with your lab environment versus your real Google Console environment, right? So open that in an incognito window set, it will reset all your clean password. So those are the things that really we are talking about here. Let me show you quickly. Can you see the next screen here? Is that showing this lab here? Right. Yeah. So a couple of things, right? Just highlight here. There are sections you can jump to it, right? There are sections you can jump to it. As you move forward, your status will change. That's the first thing. In this lab, you can do a quick readings of, it does give you some of the overview of what a chatbot is, some of the definition. I think we have going through some of those. And there are some prerequisite of some other labs you can do as a prerequisite. Those are free labs. You can save those for later time if you want to come back to do those. If you do finish labs, if you want to, interested in some other topics, as I mentioned earlier, feel free to reach out to True and eWard, and they should be able to maybe provide you some additional tokens to do the lab one more time. I'll do some other labs. There's some setup requirements, right? The things we were talking about, each one of you, once you enter this lab, once you start the clock ticking on this lab, you will see Google Console, right? I will say copy paste those. The things over here is really, you can do copy paste those username, password, and projects. This is a screen to show you how you log into the Google Console the first time. And then, you accept those terms, but that's really a lab environment. So don't worry too much about, those terms and all that. It's a free trial, right? And then it gives you a good concept of what Dialog Flow is. And also give you this is where you start, right? From here, Dialog Flow concept, and then deploy a simple Dialog Flow application using to submit a help desk ticket. So this is where your real lab starts, right? So the first thing it does is allow you to ask you to create a database in the cloud, where we're using to store our ticket information system. I will have you to go through that on your own. I just want to highlight a couple of things here. There's some API, Dialog Flow API you have to enable. And then this is where you get into, click on this one, right? This is dialogflow.cloud.google.com. And this is where you will log into the Dialog Flow console to build your virtual agent, right? And the first time you would just click, accept term and all that. Now you can start creating your virtual agent, right? We'll create a help desk virtual agent. Now remember when I talk about, or make sure you really copy paste some of the username, password, and the project ID, because you need your unique project ID over here, right? To make sure you have those information that's in there. And from there, every time, it does have a nice status check and a quick lapse. As you finish those tasks in your console, you can just click on those. It tells you whether you actually finish up to this point or not, right? And then you'll start building your intent, right? Building your virtual agent. And then of course, you can test this. So at the end of it, you can actually open a conversation, chat with your own chatbot, help desk chatbot, right? And be able to submit a ticket without talking to a real human being, right? And then the last part is, you test this, and then also make sure when the ticket is open, right? There's a process we call fulfillment, which is really, you can go back to take a look at the records that's been saved in the database. There is some code you need to copy paste in there, but we don't want you to, in this lab, to type all those things. So here is a piece of code you need for this lab. So all you have to do is just on that little icon, click on this one here. That will copy paste the whole piece of code over here. You need it for this lab. Then other than that, once you copy it over, it does need, as I mentioned earlier, it does need to have your own project ID. So really make sure you save your project ID, because your project ID is unique. As you copy paste those code here, the project ID is very unique for your own project. And then, just have fun. And I think within the next, how much time you have. If you don't finish this lab today, don't worry about it. And you can have those tokens and go home and using your spare time to finish those labs, right? Those labs are always open. At the end of it, there's a little test, and that kind of shows whether how much, and I was not talking about, objective today is really, I hope that the first hour you'll become the expert in AI and chatbot in theory only, right? The second hour, as you see eWords demo and put a little bit hands-on to build your own chatbot, it give you a little bit of the testing on your understanding of what a chatbot is all about, right? And then you're done. Congratulations. So, well, good luck with the lab and with